Despite being revered as one of the world's greatest storytelling companies, it seems that there are three stories that Disney is afraid to tell. And all three of those stories exist here inside of Disneyland. So why would a company that prides itself on being a leader in storytelling and innovation ignore three of their biggest brands and possibly three of their greatest stories? Why would Disney avoid making films about these three subjects? What are they afraid of and what are they trying to avoid? Ricky here, breaking down why Disney is afraid to touch three of its most iconic properties and to tell their stories on the big screen. But spoiler, it does seem like there's a little bit of movement, but we'll get to that later on in today's video. Thank you so much for showing up. Ask yourself, why hasn't Disney ever made a feature about their iconic founder that they're always excited to brag and talk about in high regard, but yet seem fearful to tell his story on the big screen? Walt Disney had a monumental impact on both entertainment and the world. Simply put, the man lived a legendary life, and that life would tell a legendary story. Walt Disney was one of the most innovative and successful figures of the 20th century, and like every great American story, he comes from nothing and left with accomplishing almost everything he set out to do. But yet not one scripted feature film exists about his life. Is Disney's hesitation a fear of going against his carefully curated mythology? While there are several documentaries and biographies written about Walt Disney, no scripted film exists humanizing or possibly dehumanizing this character that seems now much larger than life. The closest that Disney has ever come to tackling this is Tom Hanks' portrayal of Walt Disney in Saving Mr. Banks. It was a pretty small role. So to me, it seems that Disney's objection in trying to tell the story of the man that created the story is obviously a fear of failure. What if they made a movie about Walt that wasn't any good? What if people didn't show up? What if it made people not like the guy? What if it exposed some of the hard facts that he had to face and the hard decisions he had to face to do what he did? And also, Walt Disney is a man from a different time and a different era. How would fans of today's moralities judge Walt based on what he did to navigate through a much different time than what you and I live in today? Part of Disney wanting to preserve and protect Walt Disney is probably part of not wanting to fully tell the whole story, but condense the legend down to fun little sound bites, fun little quotes about a guy who did no wrong, good old Uncle Walt. But no man makes an omelet as big as Walt Disney without cracking a couple of eggs along the way. And so therefore, Walt Disney gets condensed down into small little stories and not a feature film on the big screen. Which is kind of crazy when you think about what a legendary story the Walt Disney story is, that the world's greatest storytellers are afraid to tell that story. But Walt Disney is only one half of the problem of the partner statue. Because if Walt Disney is the mascot for adults through Disney's eyes, Mickey Mouse is the mascot for everybody else. But for decades now, guests have been coming through the castle, going into Fantasyland, and the one character that they couldn't find was Mickey Mouse. Strangely, the company's mascot. That's right, the man who sells more merch than anybody somehow had no attraction of his own in the park, but also no feature films as well. Somehow decades have passed and yet Mickey Mouse has no feature films, which is crazy in a time where everybody's trying to think about what's the next big IP that breaks through. In this crowded media world, it's recognizability that sells movie tickets. That's why everything that you can think of from your youth is being licensed, because anything that had your attention before the internet can still get your attention after the internet. And Mickey remains one of those evergreen titles. But yet, Disney's afraid to touch it. Disney has played it overly safe with Mickey Mouse, only using him in shorts, where the risk is so much lower than doing a full feature film that if it were to flop, could damage their iconic mascot. Keeping Mickey inside of low-risk shorts alleviates the hassle of making a full feature film, because after all, if you make one bad short cartoon, the world doesn't notice. But you make one bad full-length featured film that you put millions of dollars into marketing to, everybody notices. Mickey Mouse, he's not just a cartoon character, he is a symbol for the Walt Disney Company itself. And a Mickey misstep could damage the brand. And there have been ideas and attempts to bring Mickey to the big screen, but ultimately the execs always get cold feet, possibly believing that the juice just isn't worth the squeeze. Because the expectations on a Mickey Mouse full feature film would be huge. And if you let down those expectations, that could put a lot of people guessing, are Disney really the great storytellers that they've told us that they are for decades now? But Mickey and Walt aren't the only two stories, amazing stories and properties that Disney owns that they just seem to be afraid to touch. The last one? Well, I'm standing right there. Then there's the shelved Magic Kingdom movie that Jon Favreau was trying to make for quite some time. Which makes me curious, why would Disney pull back from making a feature about the Magic Kingdom in a way that we've never seen it before, and doing it with a director that they seemingly will work on any project with? Jon Favreau has become one of the guiding hands of Star Wars, a key player in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but yet his Magic Kingdom, a depiction of Disneyland, where a family gets stuck in the park overnight and it comes to life. Yes, it's reminiscent of a movie that took place in a museum. And in fact, when Jon Favreau was working on a Jungle Book, he was experimenting with types of filmmaking and technology that he wanted to implement in his Disneyland feature. So just imagine the potential success of a movie that's somewhere between A Night at the Museum and Disneyland. It seems like something guests would love. But as of today, Disney's only had one real successful theme park movie. The Haunted Mansion movies have seemed to not find a crowd, and don't even get me started with Tomorrowland. I beg you to tell me what that movie was about. That has to be one of the worst things I've ever seen. So let's break this down. Could it be fear that would keep Disney from making a movie about its iconic theme park? A fear that if the movie wasn't good, then it would somehow tarnish this unbelievable brand? Or could there be something else at play here? Could the idea of Disneyland be that we live our own adventures in here, and a curated experience through cinema might not be exactly how people want to consume Disneyland? Although through the age of YouTube and vlogging, it does show that there are plenty of people that are willing to go on somebody else's Disneyland adventure just to get that sweet contact buzz of the magic. But whatever delay came across the desk of this Magic Kingdom movie with Jon Favreau, it seems like it's just canceled. Because surely the technology and the interest is there, but maybe this is where that fear comes in again on Disney not wanting to tell some stories. But friends, could there be some indications that Disney is starting to change its mind? Could there be an indication on the horizon that Disney is starting to loosen up on its best kept secrets and deciding to start telling these stories, but maybe in different ways than what we were anticipating? Because after 60 years, Mickey does finally have his own attraction inside of Disneyland with Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. It's insane that it took this long for Mickey Mouse to finally have a ride inside of his own park, which either shows the complete confidence that Walt Disney and Imagineering had in telling a Mickey Mouse story inside of a ride, or the desperation of where the company's at to find stories and IPs that resonate with their core customer base. I'll let you be the judge on why you think they thought that now was the time to finally give Mickey a ride. Pretty crazy to think that Mickey had an entire land before he had a ride. And Mickey Mouse isn't the only part of this changing of the guard. At D23, we saw Josh Tomorrow tell us that next year in Disneyland, Walt Disney himself will be showing up on Main Street, USA. And not only does Walt Disney showing up on Main Street put Walt's voice and story back into the park, but it also is the beginning of putting the story of Disneyland back into the park. So who knows, maybe these new pieces of technology, these new ways of storytelling will get Disney one step closer to taking that big chance on telling some of their best protected secrets. But doesn't it seem crazy that those three properties, Walt, Mickey, and Disneyland, three American icons, three of the greatest stories ever to be told, and all three owned by the company that prides itself on being the world's greatest storytellers, but won't tell these three stories? Comment below, which story would you like for them to tell, and why do you believe that these stories just are the ones that Disney is too scared to tell us?